today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Yesterday, the Zerto Ramirez versus Chris Billum-Smith unification match of Riyadh Season Latino Night was officially announced. And with it, so was the undercard. Many of the fights on the show we already knew about. I like the show.
I like the fight.
Especially for what it is. This is a non-pay-per-view, ladies and gentlemen. This is a non-pay-per-view show. And for a non-pay-per-view show, the matchmaking is good.
It's all right. You get this as part of your existing DAZN subscription at no additional charge. Over to the men's lightweight division, where unbeaten William Zepeda will take on former IBF super featherweight champion Tevin Farmer. That was in action not that long ago against unbeaten up-and-comer Raymond Muratalla.
And I gotta say that up until that point, Raymond was looking like a world beater. He was looking like a wrecking machine up until he fought Tevin Farmer. Tevin made him look bang average. Tevin made him look basic. Will he do that to William Zepeda?
I think Raymond was very lucky to get the decision in that fight.
So William's name was attached to a Shakur Stevenson fight for a little while back there. And, I knew that fight wasn't going to happen in a jiffy. That wasn't going to be next. And it's not. He's fighting Tevin Farmer instead. But I still like the fight. And two things can be true at the same time. Could you interpret William fighting Tevin instead of Shakur? Could you interpret that as being a duck?
You could.
You could, because all the ingredients of a categorical duck are there, circumventing a difficult fight, what is being perceived as a difficult fight,
For an easier fight.
circumventing a highly rated opponent for a not so highly rated opponent, that at least momentarily, you can interpret William fighting Tevin instead of Shakur as a duck. That is, unless he's using Tevin as preparation for Shakur, because you will notice that Tevin is a southpaw, and so is Shakur. Tevin is a defensive specialist, and so is Shakur.
There are differences.
But if what this is an appetizer, a prelude, preparation for a Shakur Stevenson fight, and that fight gets made, it gets made in a timely fashion, then no, it wasn't a duck.
If they make it next year.
Then no, it wasn't a duck. Over to the fight. One of the differences between Tevin and Shakur as defensive specialists is where Shakur is primarily an outside jabber and an outside mover, Tevin is a bit more comfortable mid-range to inside. That's why his fights are a bit more entertaining than what you get from Shakur. The Tevin will sit in the pocket, roll and ride punches, parry punches, counter punches.
Spends a bit more time in the pocket than Shakur does. Now, that's not saying the guy's got cement blocks for feet. He moves around when the situation calls for it, but he doesn't spend the majority of the time or the majority of the round moving around.
Just moving around. Tevin Farmer alternates between working inside the pocket and working outside of the pocket, whereas Shakur, as of late, he spends the majority of the fight on the outside,
moving around.
And that's where they're different. A fight between Tevin and William might actually turn out to be more entertaining than a fight with Shakur and William, because Tevin lets his hands go a little more. That could be to his detriment, but still.
More entertaining.
Between Tevin's comfortability level, mid-range to inside, to roll and ride punches, catching counter punches, and that being William Zepeda's sweet spot, mid-range to inside, and his work rate.
Because this guy's a Gatling gun.
It could be a very entertaining fight. So will Tevin Farmer do to William what he just did to Raymond Muratalla? Will he make him look human? Will he make him look basic? Or will William do to Tevin what he did to Giovanni Cabrera? Will he stop him?
William throws 3 and 4 punch combinations, 5 and 6 punch combinations.
That even if the first 2 or 3 punches don't get in, the last 2 might, the last 2 will, and those will do damage if it happens often enough within a round, in the fight.
At the same time, Tevin Farmer's a talented counterpuncher.
He's not the biggest of punchers in the lightweight division per se, but being able to catch a guy in between the punches when he don't expect it, that amplifies the damage. And because William throws 3 and 4 punches at a time, Tevin will get the opportunity to catch him in between. It's either William's work rate is going to overwhelm Tevin, or Tevin will exploit his aggression, his combination punching, use it against him to land hard counters.
I like the fight.
That's why even if you consider this a categorical duck, that William is fighting Tevin instead of fighting Shakur, it's still a good fight. two things can be true at the same time. Tevin Farmer's propensity for sitting in a pocket and working off the counter creates a situation to where he could make William uncomfortable to let his hands go, as odd as that might sound.
Hard to imagine.
Because Tevin's not always on his bike. He's not always trying to work on the outside. He can work on the inside too, and you figure that if he does, and he counters William enough,
He can make him hesitant. Sometimes that's how it happens.
the other way it might happen is William is coming in too hot, throwing too much at Tevin Farmer, and he doesn't want to sit in the pocket with him. He retreats, and he ends up moving around, getting chased down. That William could be throwing too much, too fast at Tevin Farmer, causing Tevin Farmer to exit the pocket and effectively get outworked most of the time in most of the rounds. That's the other way it could happen, until eventually he stops him or wins a points decision. Like I said, it is an intriguing matchup. It's not Shakur Stevenson, but it is a good fight.
Consider it an appetizer.
Now, if William wins, and he goes as far as stopping Tevin Farmer, who hasn't been stopped in a very long time.
He was stopped years ago at super featherweight by Jose Pedraza.
It was a long time ago, many years. Many years later, if William can stop Tevin, William can go into that Stevenson fight with the confidence that even against a defensive specialist, can stay in character.
Can be the same guy.
So I like the fight. Now, as it pertains to Shakur Stevenson, who I just mentioned, I'm sure most of you have heard by now that Stevenson versus Cordina is off and won't take place next month on the undercard of Better Be versus Bivol due to a hand injury Shakur Stevenson has suffered. My initial reaction, I hope Shakur has a speedy recovery, but I'm not at all broken up about this fight being canceled. I'm not at all broken up that it's off because I really didn't like the fight. I don't blame Shakur.
That is, I didn't blame him.
You know, Gervonta Davis, he can't be bothered with Shakur. Williams seems to have been guided in the direction of Tevin instead of him.
Can't blame Shakur for that. What was he supposed to do?
Vasyl Lomachenko doesn't seem all that interested. He chose to fight George Kambosos instead of Shakur, and then afterwards, he chose to take the rest of the year off. So it just is what it is, that many of the somebodies in this division, they don't really want to do nothing with Shakur, at least not right now. So when he ends up with a Joe Cordina,
Coming off a loss.
it's really not his fault. He's already been swerved by Frank Martin last year and Isaac Cruz the year before that.
It's not his fault.
You don't have to like Shakur's methodology, his style of fighting. You don't have to like the aesthetic of his fights or him as a person to acknowledge that he has been swerved. He's been swerved by a lot of people, and it just is what it is. So when he ends up with a Joe Cordina, it's really not his fault.
And so, I didn't like the fight, but I didn't blame Shakur Stevenson for it either. They're just doing the best they can.
Or they were before the fight got canceled. I want to say I wasn't crazy about that fight, and it didn't make sense to me that that fight would be the lead-in, the co-main to the main, the Better Be versus Bivol fight. When you think about the aesthetic of a Shakur Stevenson fight, a slow-paced fight where not a lot is happening, not a lot of punches are being thrown, in all likelihood it's going to go all 12, there won't be a knockout.
How could that be the co-main?
It made more sense to me that Wardley versus Clark be the lead-in to the main event. That should be the co-main, because the first fight was an all-action shootout with thrills and spills and ebbs and flows. That should be the co-main, not Stevenson versus Cordina, that is now not happening.
Shakur's got hand issues. Joe's got to be sympathetic because I heard that Joe has hand issues of his own. He's had hand issues in the past.
He has.
Before Shakur Stevenson left Top Rank, on 2 separate occasions, you heard he's having hand problems.
That he was having hand issues ahead of the Edwin De Los Santos fight, and he was having hand issues again in the Artem Haratunian fight.
Either in the fight or after the fight, something like that.
It's funny that so many of these youngsters these days liken themselves to Floyd Mayweather, and all they seem to have that Floyd had was the hand issues, because Floyd had hand issues. He had brittle hands, which is why he based himself out of Vegas, where they let him use Silocaine legally.
I mean, not just because of that, you know, in Vegas, in those days, that's where the money was, but also it helped that in Vegas, they allowed him to use Silocaine, and it wasn't against the rules.
Looking at Shakur and what seemed to be chronic hand issues that he's having, that might explain his lack of punching power and his lack of output.
Pure boxers like Shakur, in a very general sense, don't throw that many punches, but just imagine when the pure boxer also has hand issues.
It's going to throw even less, and be even more cautious. This would explain the aesthetic of Shakur Stevenson's last 2 fights.
So when the Williams-Zepeda fight first became a talking point, I talked about how stylistically, guys like William give guys like Shakur problems, combination punchers that take chances and aren't afraid to throw 3 and 4 punches at a time, 4 and 5 punches at a time. You think about that.
Some disgruntled Shakur Stevenson fans who thought what I was suggesting was preposterous when styles make fights, folks. Whether you like the fighters or not, whether you love the fighters or not, it's styles that make fights. And when you combine those 2 base styles, what usually happens, though not always, but what usually happens is the pressure guy wears out that pure boxer, because that pure boxer just don't throw enough or don't crack hard enough to keep the pressure guy honest.
Right?
It's what usually happens. Not always, but that's what usually happens. So you think about that, and you think about these chronic hand issues that Shakur seems to be having.
The news is still fresh, and we don't know just how severe the injury is. If Shakur is going to be out injured, for how long? How soon can he be back?
Is that saying that upon his return next year, depending on when it is, he'll go straight into a Williams-Zepeda fight off of that injury?
Just some things to think about.
Upstairs in men's super middleweight news, ahead of this weekend's Edgar Berlanga fight, Canelo Alvarez was asked why he believes Terence Crawford is an easy fight for him. You know what we saw in the last fight with him versus Israel Madrimov. I think that's why there are weight classes. That's why I think it's an easy fight for me. And he's not off base.
I'm a huge Terence Crawford fan, and up until the Madrimov fight, I wasn't counting him out.
Up until that fight. Now I feel that Terence Crawford can do better and look better at 154 if he stays active at 154. But at 168, from 154 with Madrimov to 168 for Canelo, I'm sorry, Terence doesn't win that fight.
And I'm a huge fan of the guy, but I don't analyze fights with rose-tinted lenses on.
I'm not sat here hoping that Terence can pull it off, trying to convince myself that he can, in spite of what my 2 eyes just saw. If you struggled with Madrimov, and you did, then Canelo puts you out.
The amount of right hands that Israel was able to bounce off of Terence Crawford's head from the beginning of the fight to the middle, if one of those right hands is from Canelo, Terence won't take it so good. He won't take it as well.
You expect me to believe that he can go 36 minutes up there with Canelo Alvarez with all that added weight, and it won't slow him down, and the whole 36 minutes Canelo won't get in with anything hard?
Come on.
I don't like his chances. I was willing to entertain the fight before, and I'm not advocating against it now. I'm just saying that if they do it, I think Canelo stops him. I think Canelo knocks him out. Canelo Alvarez has said...
Get a whiff of this.
He said he's open to fighting Conor McGregor in a boxing match next year. Yeah, why not? Then we'll show boxing is better. Easy, very easy money. I knock him out at the time I want, 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, whatever I want.
Some people aren't gonna like this.
In fairness, Canelo Alvarez has entertained a Crawford fight, a Benavidez fight. Canelo Alvarez, in his own words, said any one of those fights can happen, but so can this one. And this one is worth a lot more money than those fights. Now, I'm not watching Canelo Alvarez's pockets.
I'm just gauging the probability of this fight happening based on its marquee value and how much money the fighters stand to make. That if Conor stands to make a lot of money and Canelo stands to make a lot of money, it's highly probable that this happens.
It's plausible. Now, I don't think this would do what Conor did with Floyd Mayweather way back when these boxing versus MMA crossovers still had a bit more mystique. I don't think commercially Canelo versus McGregor would do those same numbers, but it would still do good numbers. Very good numbers.
The stumbling blocks.
If my memory serves me, it was supposed to be Conor McGregor at the Sphere in Vegas. He was supposed to be the one headlining the show, but I think he fell injured.
The stumbling blocks.
Is Conor McGregor still under contract with the UFC? Because if he is, then Dana White has got to have his say in the matter. If Conor is still under contract, to Dana.
I don't know what, if any, autonomy Conor has to have a crossover fight that doesn't involve the UFC, but that is something that needs to be sorted out.
Sports analyst and public persona Demetria Obalor reacted to this news by saying, if this fight happened before Canelo Crawford, I don't think I'd ever watch a Canelo fight again. An adverse reaction, that this isn't the guy that people want Canelo to fight.
Some people want him to fight Terence Crawford, other people want him to fight David Benavidez, but nobody was asking him to fight Conor McGregor.
This is different. This would be different than when Floyd fought Conor McGregor, because when Floyd fought him, he was retired. He was retired from professional boxing and free to stage these novelty fights, whereas Canelo is a sitting champion, still in possession of 3 of the 4 major titles.
If you don't want to be bothered with pesky mandatories anymore, the least you can do is give up those alphabet titles so that those guys can get the chance to fight for them, since you won't give them that chance. That if you're more interested in Conor than them, vacate those belts.
It's the least he can do, because if he doesn't, then he's holding up the division.
He'll be left open for criticism, even more criticism than what he already gets. I'm not even against him fighting Conor, to be honest with you.
Though what it means to me, and my interpretation of it is, where Canelo says he has no plans of retiring, that's exactly what this heralds, the retirement stage. When you're at a stage that you're fighting in novelty fights, you're close to the end. And if that's what he's suggesting,
And he is.
preliminary reports seem to indicate that beyond this weekend's fight with Edgar Berlanga, they plan on doing some kind of an exhibition or novelty fight in Japan later on this year. At the same time, Canelo is suggesting a Conor McGregor fight for next year. So what's that? 2 novelty fights?
2 of them?
He says he has no plans of retiring no time soon, but 2 novelty fights? That's what that indicates. Retirement. That you're either nearing retirement or you're retired already.
If he retired right now, right here and right now, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer with a great career.
Great success, the kind that most professional boxers can only hope to have. It feels like he is delaying the inevitable. That's how it sounds, that he's not quite ready to retire,
To announce it.
but that's the stage he's entering into.